Blood splattered across the white wedding cake as another guest collapsed, crimson foam bubbling from their lips. The Hamptons' estate ballroom had transformed into chaos. Women in silk gowns convulsing on the marble floor, men in designer tuxedos gasping for breath that wouldn't come. Margaret Whitmore crawled toward Amelia through the carnage, her manicured fingers clawing at the black woman's dress. "Please," she whispered, the word she'd never spoken to the maid before. "Help us." Then, Amelia jolted awake in her narrow bed, heart hammering against her ribs. What a relief! It was just a dream. But the nightmare clung to her like smoke. Welcome back to Eva's Stories. I have missed you all so much. Thank you for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The alarm never had a chance to ring. Amelia Johnson's eyes opened at exactly 6:30, same as every morning for the past 12 years. Her small room above the Whitmore Estate's kitchen held little beyond necessity: a single bed with worn sheets, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window overlooking the sprawling grounds where her people had once worked different fields under different circumstances. She dressed in her standard uniform: black slacks, white blouse, hair pulled back in a tight bun. No jewelry except the thin gold cross her grandmother had given her, tucked beneath her collar where Mrs. Whitmore couldn't see it and complain about inappropriate accessories. The nightmare lingered as she descended the back stairs. Blood and screaming. Mrs. Whitmore begging. Felt too real, too specific. Amelia shook her head. Just nerves about the wedding chaos ahead. The kitchen buzzed with controlled frenzy. Beverly Grant, the catering supervisor, barked orders at a team of temporary staff. Elegant hors d'oeuvres covered every surface: caviar blinis, truffle canapes, miniature beef Wellingtons. Everything Margaret Whitmore had insisted upon for her son's event of the season. "Amelia!" Beverly waved her over. "Thank God. Can you handle the family's breakfast service? My people need to focus on reception prep." "Of course." Amelia tied her apron, muscle memory taking over. Fresh orange juice for the judge. Coffee black. Whole grain toast for Margaret. No butter. Harrison would want his usual protein shake before the ceremony. She arranged the silver service with practiced precision, each piece positioned exactly as Margaret preferred. 12 years of corrections had beaten the exact spacing into her hands. What if you just didn't? The thought surfaced unbidden. What if you let them see how much they need you? Amelia pushed the dangerous idea away. She had 3 grandchildren depending on the money she sent to Detroit each month. Rebellion was a luxury she couldn't afford. The main house loomed before her as she crossed the service yard, its colonial facade gleaming white in the morning sun. Judge Whitmore had bought the estate 20 years ago when his judicial career peaked, one of the few black-owned properties he'd managed to purchase in the exclusive Hamptons community. The irony wasn't lost on Amelia. She cleaned the house of a black judge who'd made it but still treated her like furniture. Inside, she moved through familiar corridors lined with family portraits. Generations of Whitmores stared down from gilded frames, their pale faces reflecting privilege and expectation. Not one brown face among them until the judge married in. The breakfast room overlooked the garden where white chairs faced an altar draped in roses. Everything perfect. Everything planned to the last detail. There you are. Margaret Whitmore swept in wearing a silk robe the color of champagne, her blonde hair already styled despite the early hour. The toast is cold again. How many times must I explain that timing matters? I'll get fresh pieces right away, Mrs. Whitmore. See that you do. And Amelia. Margaret's voice carried that particular edge Amelia knew well. Today is important. Crucial. I won't tolerate any issues. Issues. Code for anything that might remind the guests that their hostess employed black help. Amelia had learned to read the subtext years ago. Of course, ma'am. The Pembertons are old Boston money. Charlotte's family traces back to the Mayflower. They expect a certain standard. Amelia nodded, her face a practiced mask of servility. Inside, familiar anger simmered. She'd served dinners for Supreme Court justices, foreign diplomats, Fortune 500 CEOs. But today she was just potential embarrassment. Harrison bounded in, grinning and already sweating from his morning run. Unlike his mother, the groom had always treated Amelia with basic courtesy. "Morning, Amelia. Big day, huh? Congratulations, Mr. Harrison. Miss Charlotte is a lucky woman. Thanks. Mom, have you seen? Your father is in his study, returning calls." Margaret didn't look up from her phone. "And Harrison, please shower before greeting any early guests. Appearances matter today." Amelia refilled Margaret's coffee, invisible as always. The family continued their conversation around her as if she were automated furniture. Discussion of final preparations, guest arrivals, photography schedules. She existed in their peripheral vision, noticed only when something needed fixing. A crash from the kitchen interrupted the morning routine. Through the windows, they could see catering staff scrambling around fallen trays. "What now?" Margaret's voice turned sharp. "Amelia, go handle whatever crisis is unfolding. Make sure none of this disrupts the guest's arrival." "Yes, ma'am." As Amelia hurried toward the kitchen, Margaret's voice followed her. "And remember, stay out of sight once the ceremony begins. I won't have you wandering around where guests can see you." The words hit like a slap, just as intended. 12 years of faithful service, and she was still just something to be hidden away. This is the last time, Amelia thought as she pushed through the kitchen doors. After today, things will change. She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. The kitchen chaos turned out to be nothing more than a nervous catering assistant dropping champagne flutes. Amelia swept up crystal shards while Beverly Grant reassured her team that accidents happened during high-pressure events. The temporary staff looked young and overwhelmed, faces flushed with the weight of serving Hampton's elite. "Everyone take a breath," Beverly announced. "We've catered presidential fundraisers. This is just another wedding. Just another wedding." Amelia almost laughed. Nothing about the Whitmore family was ever just anything. She finished cleaning and returned to the main house, where the transformation had begun. Florists arranged massive bouquets throughout the reception areas. A string quartet tuned instruments on the terrace. Photographers tested lighting angles, capturing the estate's picture-perfect elegance. The first guests arrived at noon, stepping from gleaming cars onto the circular driveway. Women in designer dresses, men in tailored suits, all carrying themselves with the casual confidence that came from never questioning their place in the world. Amelia recognized several faces from previous events: politicians, business leaders, society fixtures who treated her house calls like visiting a museum. Margaret emerged transformed, wearing an ice blue silk dress that probably cost more than Amelia's annual salary. Her smile radiated calculated warmth as she greeted arrivals. The judge looked distinguished in his morning coat, every inch the successful federal jurist. Together they formed the perfect picture of accomplished black excellence. "Amelia!" Margaret's voice cut through the reception area bustle. "I need you to check on Charlotte. The bridal suite. Make sure she has everything required." Amelia climbed the grand staircase to the second floor, her footsteps muffled by Persian runners. The bridal suite buzzed with activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, bridesmaids fussing over final details. Charlotte Pemberton sat before an ornate mirror, transformed into a vision of old-money perfection. "Oh, Amelia!" Charlotte turned, her face lighting up. Unlike her future mother-in-law, the bride had always been genuinely kind. "Thank goodness. I'm so nervous I can barely think straight." "You look beautiful, Miss Charlotte. Mr. Harrison is a lucky man." "Thank you. Listen, could you possibly bring some chamomile tea? My stomach is in knots." Amelia noted the request, then helped coordinate the final touches, adjusting the cathedral-length veil, ensuring the antique pearl necklace lay perfectly. Charlotte's bridesmaids chattered about the ceremony, the reception, the honeymoon plans in Tuscany. Returning downstairs, Amelia found the estate in full celebration mode. The ceremony had concluded flawlessly, and cocktail hour was in full swing. Guests mingled on the terraces, champagne glasses catching afternoon sunlight. The newlyweds posed for photographs while the photographer captured their happiness from every angle. She delivered Charlotte's tea, then checked on reception preparations. The ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers blazing, tables set with finest china and silver, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath creating perfect elegance. Amelia! Margaret appeared at her elbow, slightly breathless with excitement and champagne. The receiving line went perfectly. Now I need you to coordinate with catering for the dinner service. Everything must be flawless. Back in the kitchen, the controlled chaos had reached its peak. Beverly directed her team through final preparations for the 5-course dinner. Servers received last-minute instructions while chefs put finishing touches on elaborate presentations. Amelia moved through the organized madness, checking details with practiced efficiency. She noticed one of the temporary staff workers, a thin man with nervous energy, working alone near the family's reserved table settings. Something about his movements caught her attention. Too quick, too furtive. "Excuse me," she approached him. "Can I help you with something?" The man startled, nearly dropping the small vial in his hand. "Just checking the seasoning. Making sure everything's perfect." Amelia's grandmother had always told her to trust her instincts, and right now every instinct screamed danger. The man's explanation didn't match his actions. Seasoning came from the kitchen, not from personal vials carried in pockets. "What's your name?" she asked. "I don't remember seeing you at the staff briefing." "Danny Kozlov. Beverly hired me last minute when someone called in sick." The name struck a chord. Danny Kozlov. She'd heard it before, whispered in kitchen conversations. A former groundskeeper who'd been fired 6 months ago for stealing. Judge Whitmore had refused to press charges, but the man had been banned from the property. "I'll check with Beverly about the seasoning procedures," Amelia said carefully. Danny's eyes hardened. "No need. I know what I'm doing." But Amelia was already moving toward Beverly, who stood directing servers near the kitchen entrance. "Beverly, can I speak with you privately?" They stepped into the pantry. "What's wrong?" Beverly asked. "The man working on the family table settings. Danny Kozlov. Wasn't he fired from here months ago?" Beverly's face went pale. "Danny Kozlov? I didn't hire anyone by that name. My temp agency sent over their usual crew." Ice formed in Amelia's stomach. "He had a vial. Said he was checking seasoning, but something felt wrong." "Show me. Now." They returned to the dining area, but Danny had vanished. Amelia scanned the room, spotting him near the service exit, moving quickly toward the door. "There!" She pointed. "He's leaving." Beverly shouted for security, but Danny was already through the exit and running across the grounds. By the time they reached the door, he disappeared into the wooded area bordering the estate. "We need to check everything he touched," Beverly said, her professional calm cracking. "If he tampered with the food." They rushed back to the family's table. The elegant place settings looked undisturbed, but Amelia noticed subtle differences. Slightly moved plates, water glasses positioned differently than her precise arrangements. "Call the police," Amelia said. "And don't let anyone eat anything until we know what he did." But even as Beverly reached for her phone, the dinner service was beginning. Servers emerged from the kitchen carrying the first course, delicate amuse-bouches arranged on crystal plates. The family's table received special attention, as always. Judge Whitmore stood to offer a toast. "To Harrison and Charlotte, may your marriage be blessed with the happiness you've brought to all of us." The guests raised their glasses. The newlyweds smiled radiantly. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, overcome with emotion and pride. And Amelia watched in horror as the family lifted the poisoned food toward their lips. "Stop!" she screamed, racing toward their table. "Don't eat anything." Every head in the ballroom turned toward her. The string quartet faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Margaret's face transformed from surprise to fury as she realized her maid had just disrupted the most important moment of the evening. "What is the meaning of this outburst?" Margaret's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Amelia stood in the center of the ballroom, every guest staring at her, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. But she thought of the nightmare, of blood and screaming, of Margaret crawling toward her begging for help. "The food is poisoned," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. "Danny Kozlov. He was here. He put something in your plates." Judge Whitmore set down his fork slowly. "Amelia, that's a very serious accusation." "I saw him. He had vials." Beverly confirmed she didn't hire him. "He used to work here until you fired him for stealing." Margaret's face had gone white, but whether from fear or rage, Amelia couldn't tell. "You're saying someone tried to poison my family at my son's wedding?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm saying exactly that." The ballroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Some guests looked terrified, others skeptical. Margaret stood slowly, her eyes fixed on Amelia with an expression that promised consequences. "If you're wrong about this," Margaret said, her voice deadly quiet, "if you've ruined my son's wedding with paranoid delusions, I will personally ensure you never work in this county again." Amelia met her gaze steadily. "And if I'm right, ma'am, I just saved your life." The ballroom held its breath. 200 of the Hamptons' most influential people sat frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching a black maid accuse someone of trying to murder their hosts. The silence stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat, his judicial training taking over. "Beverly, please call the police immediately. Everyone else, please remain calm while we investigate this matter." Margaret's hands trembled as she set down her fork, the reality sinking in. "You're certain about what you saw?" "Yes, ma'am. Danny Kozlov was working on your table settings with vials. When I questioned him, he ran." "But why would Danny want to hurt us?" Harrison asked, still holding Charlotte's hand. "We gave him a good severance package when we had to let him go." Amelia hesitated. She knew more about Danny's dismissal than the family realized. Kitchen gossip traveled differently than official stories. "He blamed you for his wife leaving him. Said the firing cost him his marriage, his house, everything." Evelyn Cross, Margaret's elderly mother, spoke from her place of honor at the family table. "I remember that young man. He used to maintain the rose garden. Always seemed resentful, like the world owed him something." Dr. Helen Morrison, the family physician and longtime friend, moved toward the table. "If there's even a possibility of poison, we should test everything immediately. I can take samples for analysis." "How long would that take?" Charlotte asked, her wedding day joy evaporating into fear. "Hours at minimum. Days for conclusive results." Officer Tom Blake arrived within minutes, his patrol car's lights casting blue and red across the estate grounds. Beverly met him at the entrance and quickly explained the situation. He entered the ballroom with the measured authority of someone accustomed to disrupting wealthy people's evenings. "I'm going to need everyone to remain seated while we secure the scene," Blake announced. "No one should consume anything from the family table until we can test it." Margaret stood abruptly. "Officer, surely you understand the position this puts us in. Our guests, our son's wedding." "Ma'am, if there's a credible threat to your family's safety, protocol takes precedence over social considerations." Blake began interviewing witnesses, starting with Amelia. She recounted everything she'd observed, from Danny's nervous behavior to his suspicious explanation about seasoning. The officer took detailed notes, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "You're certain this man was Danny Kozlov?" "Yes, sir. I recognized him from when he worked here. He also confirmed his name when I asked." "And you say he was specifically working on the family's table settings?" "Only theirs. He wasn't touching any other plates or glasses." Blake interviewed Beverly next, confirming that no one named Danny Kozlov appeared on her staffing list. The catering supervisor checked her records twice, her professional reputation hanging in the balance. "My agency vets everyone thoroughly," Beverly insisted. "Background checks, references, the works. If he was here, he wasn't authorized." Other staff members corroborated seeing an unfamiliar man working near the family table, though most had been too busy with their own duties to pay close attention. The temporary workers confirmed that Danny hadn't been part of their group. Blake radioed for backup and a crime scene team. "We'll need to test everything on that table, plus dust for fingerprints. This is now an active investigation." The announcement sent ripples through the guest list. Some people began gathering their belongings, clearly uncomfortable with staying at a potential crime scene. Others seemed fascinated by the drama, treating it like dinner theater. Margaret watched her carefully planned event dissolving into chaos. "Officer Blake, isn't there some way to handle this more discreetly? These are very important people." "Ma'am, attempted murder isn't something we handle discreetly. If someone tried to poison your family, they're still out there." Harrison put his arm around Charlotte, who had begun crying quietly. "This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives." "It still can be," Amelia said softly. "You're alive. You're together. Everything else can be fixed." Margaret whirled on her. "Don't you dare try to console my son after creating this disaster." "I didn't create anything, Mrs. Whitmore. I prevented something. You don't know that. For all we know, you're having some kind of breakdown. The stress of the day, imagining threats that don't exist." The accusation hit Amelia like a physical blow. After 12 years of faithful service, Margaret was questioning her sanity rather than accepting that she might have saved their lives. Dr. Morrison stepped between them. "Margaret, stress can make people see things differently, but Amelia has given us specific, verifiable details. The man she described exists. He was fired from this property. Those are facts, not delusions." "But why would he target us specifically?" Judge Whitmore asked. If he was angry about his termination, there were proper channels for grievance. Amelia took a deep breath. She'd hoped to avoid this part, but the family deserved the truth. "He blamed you for his divorce. Said his wife left him because he couldn't find work after being fired from such a prominent family. Called you. Said you didn't care about working people." The judge's face darkened. "I gave him every opportunity to correct his behavior. The theft was documented. I could have prosecuted but chose mercy instead." "Some people see mercy as weakness," Officer Blake observed. "Or worse, as condescension. It can fuel resentment instead of gratitude." The crime scene team arrived and began processing evidence. They carefully bagged the family's plates, glasses, and utensils. Photographers documented everything. Fingerprint technicians dusted surfaces. Blake pulled Amelia aside for a more detailed interview. "Walk me through your movements today. When did you first notice something unusual?" Amelia described her entire day, from the nightmare that morning through the kitchen chaos to her confrontation with Danny. Blake listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification. "You said he had vials." "Multiple. At least 2 that I saw. Small glass containers, like the kind used for essential oils or medicine." "And he was working specifically on the water glasses when you approached?" "Yes, sir. He startled when I spoke to him, almost dropped what he was holding." Blake made more notes. "Had you seen him anywhere else on the property today?" "No, sir. Just in the dining area near the family table." The officer's radio crackled with an update. A patrol unit had found Danny's abandoned car 2 miles from the estate, parked behind an old gas station. Inside, they discovered empty vials labeled with chemical names Amelia couldn't pronounce. "That confirms it," Blake told the family. "Someone did attempt to poison you tonight. The lab will determine exactly what substance was used, but preliminary field tests suggest it was something potentially lethal." Margaret sank into her chair, the color draining from her face. "He really tried to kill us. All of us." "It appears so, ma'am. If your maid hadn't intervened when she did." Blake didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. They'd been minutes away from consuming whatever Danny had put in their food and drinks. Charlotte sobbed openly now, clinging to Harrison. "Our wedding day. How could someone hate us enough to do this on our wedding day?" "It's not about you specifically," Blake explained. "From what we're seeing, this was about revenge against your parents. You and your sister were collateral damage in his mind. Chloe Whitmore had been unusually quiet throughout the evening, but now she spoke up. This is insane. Danny seemed like such a quiet guy when he worked here. He always said good morning, never caused trouble. People can hide their true feelings for a long time, her father said. Especially when they're planning something like this. The investigation continued for another hour. Blake interviewed more guests, particularly those who had interacted with catering staff. A few remembered seeing an unfamiliar man, but no one had paid enough attention to provide useful details. Finally, Blake addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we've secured the immediate area and collected evidence. You're free to leave, though we may need to contact some of you for follow-up questions. The guests began filing out, their conversations a mixture of shock, concern, and inevitable gossip. By tomorrow, the story would be all over the Hamptons social circuit. Margaret stood in the center of her destroyed ballroom, watching her perfect evening crumble around her. The untouched cake stood like a monument to failed celebration. Flower arrangements wilted under crime scene lights. Her son's wedding had become a police investigation. What do we do now? She asked no one in particular. We're grateful, Judge Whitmore said firmly. We're alive because Amelia was paying attention when the rest of us were caught up in the celebration. Margaret looked at Amelia, her expression unreadable. For 12 years, she'd treated this woman as invisible, as just another household appliance. Tonight, that same woman had saved her life. I need some air, Margaret said abruptly, walking toward the terrace doors. Amelia watched her go, understanding that everything had changed between them. The question was whether it had changed for better or worse. The estate felt hollow after the last police car disappeared down the driveway. Crime scene tape fluttered around the ballroom entrance like yellow ribbons marking a disaster. The wedding guests had scattered to their lives, carrying whispered stories of poison and drama that would fuel Hampton's gossip for months. Amelia stood in the kitchen, methodically cleaning champagne flutes that would never be used. Her hands moved automatically while her mind processed the evening's events. She'd saved the family's lives, but the victory felt strangely empty. Margaret's look of barely contained fury suggested this wasn't over. Thank you. She turned to find Harrison in the doorway, still wearing his wedding tuxedo but with his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. His face carried the weight of someone whose perfect day had shattered into something unrecognizable. You're welcome, Mr. Harrison. I'm sorry about your wedding. Don't apologize. You saved our lives. He sat heavily on one of the kitchen stools, suddenly looking older than his 28 years. Charlotte's upstairs crying. She keeps saying she wants to go home to Boston, that this place isn't safe. Amelia dried another glass, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes scary things happen to make us appreciate what we have. You and Miss Charlotte are alive. You're married. The rest is just details. Mom doesn't see it that way. She's been planning this wedding for 2 years. Every detail perfect, every moment choreographed. Now instead of society page photos, we'll be a crime story. Your mother will adjust. People are stronger than they think when they have to be. Harrison studied her face. How do you do it? Stay so calm after everything that happened? You could have been hurt confronting Danny like that. The question caught Amelia off guard. In 12 years, no family member had ever asked about her feelings or motivations. I couldn't let people get hurt when I could prevent it. That's not who I am. Even after how we've treated you? The honesty in his voice surprised her. Even then, Judge Whitmore appeared in the kitchen doorway, his formal jacket draped over his arm. Harrison, your mother needs you upstairs. Charlotte's having a panic attack. Harrison nodded and left, squeezing Amelia's shoulder as he passed. The gesture was small but meaningful. The judge remained, studying Amelia with the same intensity he probably used in court. Officer Blake wants to interview you again tomorrow. More detailed questions about Danny's previous behavior, anything you might have overheard. Of course, sir. You did the right thing tonight. I want you to know that. Amelia met his gaze directly. Thank you, sir. My wife is struggling with how things unfolded. The disruption of the wedding, the public nature of the investigation. She's not thinking clearly right now. It was as close to an apology as she'd ever received from the family. I understand. I'm not sure you do. The judge sat down across from her. Margaret has built her entire identity around social standing, around being accepted in circles that didn't always welcome us. Tonight threatened everything she's worked to achieve. Amelia continued cleaning, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. When we moved to the Hamptons 20 years ago, we were one of only 3 black families in this community. The isolation was challenging. Margaret responded by becoming more perfect than anyone else. Better parties, better clothes, better everything. She needed to prove we belonged. That must have been difficult. It was. And somewhere in that process, she lost sight of what really matters. Tonight reminded her, but she's not ready to accept the lesson yet. Footsteps on the stairs announced Margaret's return. She'd changed from her wedding finery into casual clothes, but her posture remained rigid with barely contained emotion. Her eyes found Amelia immediately. We need to talk. The judge stood. Margaret, perhaps tomorrow would be better. Everyone's emotions are running high. No. This can't wait. Margaret's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Amelia, the library. Now. Amelia followed Margaret through the house to the wood-paneled library where Judge Whitmore conducted his most serious conversations. Law books lined the walls, their leather spines creating an atmosphere of weighty decisions and consequences. Margaret closed the door and turned to face her. Do you have any idea what you've done? I saved your family's lives. You destroyed my son's wedding. You turned what should have been the happiest day of his life into a crime scene. You made us look like fools in front of everyone who matters in this community. Amelia felt familiar anger rising but forced it down. Would you rather be dead with dignity than alive with gossip? Don't be dramatic. We don't know that Danny would have actually gone through with it. Maybe he was just trying to scare us. He ran when I questioned him. The police found poison in his car. Those aren't the actions of someone making empty threats. Margaret began pacing, her movements sharp and agitated. Everyone will be talking about this. The Pemberton family, our friends, business associates. They'll remember this wedding as the night the Whitmore maid accused someone of attempted murder. They'll remember it as the night you survived because someone was paying attention. You don't understand what it's like to build a reputation in this world. To earn respect that can be destroyed in a single evening. Amelia set down the dish towel she'd been holding. Mrs. Whitmore, I've worked for your family for 12 years. I've watched you build your social position, maintain your friendships, host your parties. I know exactly what it costs. Do you? Do you know what it's like to be the only black woman in rooms full of people who question whether you belong there? To smile and make conversation with people who see you as an interesting novelty at best. The raw honesty surprised Amelia. She'd never seen Margaret's polished facade crack this completely. No, ma'am. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to be invisible in rooms full of people who don't see you as human. Margaret stopped pacing. That's different. Is it? You fight to be accepted by people who judge you by your race. I serve people who judge me by my position. We're both performing roles for audiences that don't value who we really are. It's not the same thing at all. I'm a federal judge's wife. You're a person who saved your life tonight? The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken tensions and unexamined assumptions. Margaret stood by the window, looking out at the darkened grounds where her perfect wedding had taken place hours earlier. I worked so hard for tonight to be perfect, she said finally, her voice softer. 2 years of planning, every detail considered. I wanted Charlotte to feel welcomed into our family, wanted her parents to see that we were worthy of their daughter. Miss Charlotte loves Mr. Harrison. That's all her parents needed to see. You think it's that simple? Love usually is. It's everything else that gets complicated. Margaret turned from the window. How did you know? What made you suspicious of Danny? Amelia considered her answer carefully. He was moving wrong, nervous, guilty, and he was focused only on your family's table. If he'd been doing legitimate work, he would have been consistent with all the settings. You've been watching our family closely enough to notice details like that? I've been taking care of your family for 12 years. I notice everything. The admission hung in the air. Margaret had never considered that her maid might be observing, analyzing, understanding the family dynamics she worked within daily. What else do you notice? Amelia hesitated. This conversation was veering into dangerous territory. I notice that you're good people who've forgotten how to see past your fears. Our fears. You're afraid of not being accepted, so you reject others first. Mr. Harrison is afraid of disappointing you, so he never challenges your decisions. Miss Chloe is afraid of living in her brother's shadow, so she rebels in small ways that hurt no one but herself. Margaret's face flushed. You think you understand my family better than I do? I think I see your family differently than you do. And tonight, that difference saved your lives. A knock on the library door interrupted the tension. Judge Whitmore entered without waiting for permission. Margaret, Charlotte's parents, are on their way from Boston. They're driving through the night to make sure she's safe. I think we should focus on supporting the children rather than assigning blame for tonight's events. Margaret nodded slowly. You're right. Of course you're right. She looked at Amelia again, her expression unreadable. We'll discuss this further tomorrow. After the police interview, after things settle down. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't condemnation either. Amelia recognized it as a temporary truce, a postponement of reckoning rather than resolution. Yes, ma'am. As Amelia left the library, she heard Margaret say to her husband, She sees too much, Robert. She knows too much about us. Maybe that's exactly what we need, the judge replied. Someone who sees us clearly enough to save our lives. Amelia climbed the back stairs to her room, exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new decisions about her place in this family's life. But tonight, the Whitmores were alive because she'd chosen courage over silence, action over safety. Whatever came next, she could live with that choice. Amelia woke to police sirens cutting through the morning air. Through her window, she watched 2 patrol cars speed up the estate's driveway, followed by an unmarked sedan. Her stomach clenched. They'd found Danny. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find the kitchen buzzing with tension. Beverly Grant stood near the coffee maker, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as poorly as everyone else. The temporary catering staff had returned to pack their equipment, their conversations hushed and nervous. Any word on what's happening? Amelia asked Beverly. Officer Blake called an hour ago. They caught Danny trying to cross into Connecticut. Had a backpack full of chemicals and what looked like suicide notes. The news hit Amelia like cold water. Suicide notes meant Danny had planned to die along with his victims. The wedding massacre would have been his final act of revenge. Judge Whitmore appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. Amelia, Officer Blake needs to speak with you again. He's in my study. She found Blake reviewing a thick file of documents, his expression grim. Morning, Miss Johnson. We need to go over Danny Kozlov's history with this family in more detail. What we found in his apartment suggests this plan was months in the making. Blake opened the file, revealing photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. Danny had been documenting the Whitmore family's activities obsessively. Photos of their social events, copies of society page articles, detailed schedules of their daily routines. He was stalking you, Blake said. The wedding was just his chosen venue because he knew the whole family would be together. Amelia studied the photographs. Some were taken from the estate's perimeter with a telephoto lens. Others appeared to be shot from inside the house, suggesting Danny had accessed the property multiple times without detection. Look at this. Blake pointed to a handwritten timeline. He's been planning this since December, right after Christmas, when he said his wife filed for divorce. The timeline detailed everything: when family members left the house, which social events they attended, even their medical appointments. Danny had been building a comprehensive picture of their lives, looking for the perfect opportunity to destroy them. Did he ever threaten the family directly when he worked here? Blake asked. Amelia shook her head. Not that I heard. But the other staff mentioned he was bitter about his position. Said he deserved better than groundskeeping work. Bitter how? He thought the judge looked down on him. Called him ungrateful for the opportunities he'd been given. Danny felt like he was being treated like charity case instead of an employee. Blake made notes. Classic resentment pattern. Perceived condescension becomes personal betrayal, which justifies extreme retaliation. Margaret entered the study without knocking, her face pale but determined. Officer Blake, I need to understand something. You said Danny left suicide notes. What did they say? Blake hesitated. Ma'am, the contents are part of an ongoing investigation. My family was the target. I have a right to know what motivated this. After a moment, Blake nodded. He blamed your husband for destroying his life. Said the firing cost him his marriage, his house, his self-respect. He believed Judge Whitmore could have helped him find other work but chose not to. That's not true, Margaret said immediately. Robert gave him excellent references. He even made calls on Danny's behalf. Danny didn't see it that way. In his mind, getting fired from a prominent family's estate marked him as unreliable. He couldn't find work that paid enough to maintain his lifestyle. Amelia remembered conversations she'd overheard in the kitchen. The other staff said Danny's wife left him because he was drinking too much, not because of money problems. He was angry and taking it out on everyone around him. Addiction often accompanies this kind of spiral, Blake agreed. But instead of taking responsibility, he externalized the blame. Made your family responsible for all his failures. Margaret sank into a chair. We tried to help him. When we had to let him go, Robert offered to write recommendations, even suggested other properties that might need groundskeeping staff. Help can feel like pity when someone's pride is wounded, Amelia observed. Maybe Danny saw kindness as condescension. Blake showed them more documents from Danny's apartment. Bank statements showing mounting debt. Eviction notices. Divorce papers citing emotional cruelty and substance abuse as grounds. The picture emerged of a man whose life had collapsed, who needed someone to blame besides himself. The really disturbing part, Blake continued, is how detailed his planning became. He studied your family's routines, learned your preferences, even researched the specific poison he intended to use. He produced a chemistry textbook with highlighted passages. Ricin, extracted from castor beans. Tasteless, odorless, and lethal in small doses. He'd been working on this for months. Margaret's hand flew to her throat. How close did we come? Based on the concentration he prepared, you would have been dead within hours. All of you. The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat sank in. This hadn't been a moment of angry impulse. Danny had spent months planning their murders, studying their habits, perfecting his method. There's something else, Blake said, pulling out a notebook. Danny kept a journal. His entries show increasing paranoia and rage. But they also reveal information about your household that suggests he had help. Amelia felt ice form in her stomach. What kind of help? Details about your daily schedules, private family conversations, even knowledge of which bedroom each family member uses. Information that would be difficult for an outsider to obtain. Margaret stood abruptly. You're suggesting someone in our household was feeding him information? I'm saying the level of detail in his plans suggests inside knowledge. Either he was accessing the property regularly without detection, or someone was providing information. Blake opened to a specific journal entry and read aloud. Thursday, February 8th. Margaret argues with Judge about Chloe's college expenses in the morning room. Judge wants her to transfer to state school. Margaret threatens to use her own inheritance to pay tuition. Chloe doesn't know about the fight. The specificity was chilling. That conversation had taken place in a private family area, during a time when no staff should have been present. How could he know that? Margaret whispered. Amelia's mind raced through possibilities. What about the security cameras? Could he have hacked them? We checked. Your system doesn't record audio, only video. And there's no camera in the morning room where that conversation took place. Blake continued reading entries that revealed intimate family details. Harrison's job stress, Charlotte's pregnancy scare before the engagement, Judge Whitmore's concerns about a pending Supreme Court case. Information that would only be available to someone with constant access to the household. We need to consider that Danny might have been working with someone, Blake said. Someone who's still here. Margaret's face went white. You think one of our staff helped plan this? I think we need to investigate that possibility. Blake began questioning each staff member individually. The housekeeper, the groundskeeping crew, the part-time cook who helped with large events. Each person accounted for their whereabouts and provided alibis for times when sensitive conversations had taken place. When Blake finished with the regular staff, he turned to Amelia. You have the most access to family areas. You overhear conversations, handle personal belongings, know their routines better than anyone. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Amelia felt the weight of suspicion settling on her shoulders. You think I was helping Danny plan to murder the family I just saved? I think you were the only person positioned to know everything Danny wrote in that journal. Margaret watched the exchange with growing alarm. Officer Blake, Amelia risked her own safety to warn us. Why would she do that if she was part of the plot? Maybe the plan changed. Maybe she got cold feet. Maybe Danny double-crossed her and she realized she was being set up to take the blame. Amelia felt the room spinning around her. After 12 years of faithful service, after saving their lives, she was being accused of conspiracy to commit murder. I need to see that journal, she said quietly. Blake hesitated, then handed it over. Amelia read through Danny's entries, her heart sinking with each page. He knew things about the family that she'd never told anyone, conversations she'd never heard. But as she read more carefully, patterns emerged. The information wasn't random. It focused on conflicts, arguments, private moments of family stress. Someone had been deliberately feeding Danny ammunition to fuel his hatred. Look at the dates, she said, pointing to the entries. These conversations all happened on Tuesdays and Fridays. Those are my days off. I wasn't here when any of these took place. Blake checked his notes. You work Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday? Yes, sir. Have for the past 3 years since Mrs. Whitmore changed my schedule. Margaret's expression shifted as understanding dawned. Tuesday and Friday are when Constance Wells comes in. She covers your off days. Constance Wells. The substitute maid who'd been working for the family almost as long as Amelia. A woman who'd always resented not being chosen as head of household staff, who'd made subtle comments about Amelia's special treatment and favoritism. Blake was already reaching for his radio. I need units to locate Constance Wells immediately. The police found Constance Wells at her small apartment in East Hampton, calmly packing a suitcase as if preparing for a planned vacation. When Officer Blake showed her Danny's journal containing detailed family conversations from her workdays, her composed facade cracked like thin ice. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, she said, sitting in the Whitmores' living room with handcuffs around her wrists. Danny said he just wanted to embarrass them, make them look foolish at some social event. Blake leaned forward. You believed he spent months planning elaborate revenge just to cause embarrassment? Constance looked down at her hands. I wanted to believe it. I was angry, and Danny's anger made mine feel justified. Margaret sat across from her, struggling to process the betrayal. You've worked for us for 9 years. We trusted you with our home, our privacy, our family. You trusted Amelia, Constance replied with bitter resentment. I was just the backup, the substitute, the one who got leftovers of responsibility. Amelia stood near the window, watching Constance's confession unfold with a mixture of sadness and vindication. She'd suspected tension between them but never imagined it could lead to something this destructive. Tell me how it started, Blake said, his voice professionally neutral. Constance took a shaky breath. Danny contacted me in January. Said he needed to understand why the judge had really fired him, whether there were things he didn't know about. He seemed so hurt, so lost. And you decided to help him? At first, I just answered questions about his work performance, whether the family had complained about him. But then he started asking about their personal lives, their relationships. Margaret's voice was ice cold. You told him about our private conversations. He said he needed to understand the real reason he was fired, whether it was about more than just the missing tools. I thought if he knew the family better, he could make amends somehow. Blake consulted his notes. According to his journal, you provided information about family arguments, financial discussions, personal conflicts. That's not about job performance. Constance's composure finally broke completely. I was jealous, okay? 12 years I've been waiting for Amelia to retire or quit so I could take over as head of household staff. But she never leaves, and the family never considers promoting me. The raw honesty was painful to hear. Amelia felt a stab of sympathy despite everything. She remembered being younger, hungrier, desperate for advancement and recognition that seemed always just out of reach. So you fed information to a man plotting to murder the family that employed you? Judge Whitmore's judicial tone carried cold judgment. I didn't know he was planning murder. I swear I didn't know. Blake showed her specific journal entries. Danny wrote detailed descriptions of your conversations. You told him about Judge Whitmore's heart medication, Margaret's anxiety about social acceptance, even Harrison's relationship doubts before proposing to Charlotte. He said he wanted to understand them as people, not just employers. I thought maybe if he could relate to their struggles, he could forgive them. You thought wrong, Margaret said flatly. The full scope of the betrayal was staggering. Constance had provided Danny with intimate family details for months, giving him ammunition to plan psychological warfare along with physical violence. She'd mapped out their vulnerabilities, their fears, their private moments of doubt and conflict. When did you realize his true intentions? Blake pressed. Yesterday morning, when he called to confirm the wedding details. He asked about the family's seating arrangements, about whether they always ate first at formal dinners. The questions felt different, more specific. But you didn't warn anyone. Constance shook her head miserably. I was scared. If I admitted I'd been talking to him, I'd lose my job, maybe face legal trouble. I convinced myself he was just planning some kind of public confrontation. Amelia finally spoke. You could have called in sick yesterday. Could have found some way to warn the family without admitting your involvement. I panicked. I didn't think clearly. You thought clearly enough to continue feeding him information for 4 months, Judge Whitmore observed. Blake continued his questioning, building a complete timeline of the conspiracy. Constance had provided Danny with schedules, personal details, even photographs taken with her phone during her workdays. She'd enabled his obsession while telling herself she was helping him find closure. The poison was always part of his plan, Blake told her. We found chemistry books in his apartment dating back to January. Purchase receipts for equipment and materials. You weren't helping him seek understanding. You were helping him commit mass murder. The weight of her unwitting complicity crushed down on Constance. She began sobbing, her body shaking with the realization of what she'd nearly caused. Margaret stood and walked to the window, staring out at the grounds where her son's wedding had taken place 24 hours earlier. The crime scene tape was gone, but the memory of chaos and terror remained. I don't understand, she said without turning around. If you resented us so much, why didn't you just quit? Find work somewhere else. Because jobs like this don't grow on trees, Constance replied through her tears. Stable employment with good families, decent pay, benefits. I couldn't afford to start over somewhere else. So instead you stayed and fed our secrets to someone planning our destruction. I made a terrible mistake. I let my jealousy and disappointment cloud my judgment. Amelia watched Margaret's reflection in the window, seeing pain and confusion warring with anger. The betrayal cut deep because it came from someone the family had trusted with their most private moments. What happens now? Margaret asked Blake. Constance will be charged with conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Danny's facing multiple counts of attempted murder, stalking, and terrorism charges. With the evidence we've collected, both will likely spend significant time in prison. Harrison and Charlotte appeared in the doorway, having driven back from their abbreviated honeymoon trip to the city. Charlotte's eyes were still red from crying, but she seemed calmer than the night before. "Is it over?" Harrison asked. "The immediate threat is over," Blake confirmed. "But there will be court proceedings, media attention, ongoing security concerns." Margaret turned from the window. "Security concerns?" "Danny kept detailed records of your family's routines and vulnerabilities. Even with him in custody, that information could be valuable to other people with grievances against your family." Judge Whitmore's position on the federal bench made them natural targets for various extremist groups and individuals seeking revenge for court decisions. The breach of their privacy extended beyond Danny's personal vendetta. "We'll need to review your security protocols," Blake continued. "Change routines, update alarm systems, possibly consider personal protection for family members." The reality of their new situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Their sense of safety and privacy had been shattered. The wedding attack was over, but its consequences would ripple through their lives for years to come. Charlotte sat beside Harrison, taking his hand. "I want to go back to Boston, at least until things settle down." "That might be wise," Blake agreed. "Give the media circus time to die down. Let us complete our investigation." Margaret looked at Amelia, her expression complex and unreadable. "What about household staff? How do we know who to trust?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Constance's betrayal had poisoned the well of trust between the family and their employees. Everyone was now suspect until proven otherwise. "You start by trusting the person who saved your lives," Judge Whitmore said firmly. "Amelia could have stayed silent last night, could have let events unfold. Instead, she risked everything to protect us." Amelia felt a warmth spread through her chest. After 12 years of feeling invisible, the judge's public acknowledgement of her courage meant everything. "We need to talk," Margaret said to Amelia. "Privately. About your future here, about how things will change." Blake stood, preparing to escort Constance to booking. "We'll need all of you available for additional questioning over the next few days. The district attorney will want detailed statements for the prosecution." As the officers left with Constance, the family gathered in the living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the elegant furniture and artwork that represented years of careful acquisition and curation. It all seemed fragile now, vulnerable to forces they'd never considered. "I can't believe someone we trusted was working against us," Charlotte said. "It makes me question everything." "Don't let paranoia consume you," Amelia advised gently. "Most people are good. Constance made terrible choices, but that doesn't mean everyone will." Margaret studied Amelia's face. "How do you maintain that faith after what happened?" "Because cynicism is a luxury I can't afford. If I stopped believing in people's basic goodness, I couldn't do my job. I couldn't take care of families, couldn't open my heart to children I help raise." The simple honesty of her answer silenced the room. Here was a woman who'd been treated as invisible, who'd endured casual racism and condescension, yet still chose to believe in human decency. "We have a lot to discuss," Margaret said finally. "About your role here, about what you need to feel safe and valued." For the first time in 12 years, Amelia felt like she was being seen as a whole person rather than just a pair of working hands. The crisis had torn away pretenses and forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about their relationships. Change was coming, whether they were ready or not. The house felt different after Constance's arrest. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets, every shadow held potential betrayal. Amelia moved through the familiar rooms with new awareness of how vulnerable the family had been, how easily their trust could be weaponized against them. She was folding laundry in the utility room when Harrison found her, his face drawn with exhaustion and stress. "Amelia, we need to talk. All of us. Mom's called a family meeting." The formal dining room had been chosen for the discussion, its mahogany table creating appropriate distance and gravity. Judge Whitmore sat at the head, Margaret to his right, Harrison and Charlotte across from them. Chloe had driven down from Columbia University, her usual rebellious confidence replaced by genuine fear. Amelia took the chair at the foot of the table. The first time in 12 years she'd been invited to sit with the family as an equal participant rather than standing at the periphery waiting for instructions. Margaret's hands were folded precisely on the table, her posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. We need to address what happened and what it means for our future. What it means, Judge Whitmore said, is that our security and privacy were completely compromised. Someone we trusted had access to every aspect of our lives. Chloe spoke up, her voice smaller than usual. I keep thinking about all the conversations Constance overheard. Personal stuff, family arguments, private moments. It feels like such a violation. It was a violation, Charlotte agreed. Danny knew things about us that even some of our closest friends don't know. Margaret's carefully maintained composure began to crack. He knew about my anxiety medication, about the therapy sessions after my mother's death, about the financial struggles we had before Robert's appointment to the federal bench. The intimate details of their vulnerabilities hung in the air like exposed nerve endings. Danny's journal had contained their deepest insecurities, their private fears, their moments of doubt and weakness. He used our humanity against us, Harrison said bitterly. Turned our honest emotions into weapons. Amelia listened to their pain, understanding their sense of violation. But she also recognized something else in their words, the assumption that trust itself was the problem. Mrs. Whitmore, she said carefully, what exactly are you planning to change? Margaret's eyes fixed on her with laser intensity. Everything. We can't afford to be vulnerable again. What does that mean? It means no more personal conversations in common areas. No more casual discussions of family business where staff might overhear. No more trust without verification. Judge Whitmore nodded grimly. We'll need background checks on all household employees, updated every 6 months. Security cameras in all work areas. Maybe even monitoring of personal communications. Amelia felt ice forming in her stomach. You're talking about turning your home into a fortress. We're talking about survival, Margaret snapped. About protecting ourselves from people who would use our kindness against us. By becoming unkind? The challenge in Amelia's voice surprised everyone, including herself. But she couldn't stay silent while fear transformed this family into something unrecognizable. Margaret's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare lecture us about kindness. You have no idea what it's like to be targeted like this. Don't I? Amelia's voice remained steady, but emotion simmered beneath the surface. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been judged, dismissed, and treated as less than human more times than I can count. The difference is, I chose not to let that poison turn me into someone I didn't recognize. It's not the same thing, isn't it? You're so afraid of being hurt again that you're willing to hurt everyone around you first. That's exactly what Constance did. Exactly what Danny did. The comparison hit like a physical blow. Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. How dare you compare us to people who tried to murder us? I'm comparing your response to theirs. Fear making you cruel. Pain making you paranoid. Hurt making you hurtful. Harrison tried to intervene. Amelia, Mom's just trying to protect us. By becoming the kind of people who create enemies instead of preventing them? Judge Whitmore's judicial training kicked in, his voice cutting through the rising emotion. What exactly are you suggesting we do? Pretend this didn't happen? Continue as if nothing changed? I'm suggesting you change the right things. Your security, yes. Your awareness, absolutely. But not your hearts. Amelia stood, facing the family that had employed her for 12 years. Yesterday, you were almost murdered by someone whose pain and resentment festered because no one helped him deal with it properly. Today, you want to create a system that will breed more pain and resentment. Margaret's voice turned deadly quiet. Are you threatening us? I'm warning you. If you treat every employee like a potential enemy, if you monitor and suspect and distance yourselves from the people who serve you, you'll create exactly the conditions that led to yesterday's attack. So we should just trust blindly? Ignore red flags. Pretend that loyalty can't be bought or manipulated. You should treat people like human beings. You should pay attention to their struggles, their needs, their dignity. You should remember that respect and fairness prevent more problems than surveillance and suspicion. Chloe had been unusually quiet, but now she spoke up. Amelia's right. The problem wasn't that we trusted Constance. The problem was that we never really saw her. Margaret whirled on her daughter. What's that supposed to mean? We treated her like furniture. We never asked about her life, her goals, her feelings. She worked here for 9 years, and I couldn't tell you if she has family, hobbies, dreams, anything. Harrison nodded slowly. Same with Danny when he worked here. We gave him tasks, paid him, but never really connected with him as a person. Connection is what prevented tragedy, Amelia said. Not the connection between Constance and Danny, but the connection between me and this family. I saved your lives because I care about you as people, not just employers. Charlotte spoke for the first time since the meeting began. In Boston, our housekeeper Mrs. O'Brien feels like family. She knows about my college struggles, my relationship history, my dreams. We know about her grandchildren, her late husband, her volunteer work at church. That's different, Margaret insisted. Your family has known her for decades. And in decades of working here, what do you know about Amelia beyond her work performance? The question hung in the air, exposing an uncomfortable truth. Despite 12 years of daily interaction, Margaret knew virtually nothing about Amelia's personal life, her background, her aspirations. I know she's reliable, Margaret said defensively. Do you know she has 3 grandchildren in Detroit? Charlotte pressed. Do you know she sends money to support their education? Do you know she volunteers at a homeless shelter on her days off? Margaret's face went pale. She'd been living with someone for 12 years without learning basic facts about her life. Do you know her grandmother was a civil rights activist? Charlotte continued. That she taught Amelia to choose service over bitterness, love over hate, even when people don't deserve it? How do you know all this? Harrison asked his new wife. Because I asked. Because I listened. Because I treated her like a person instead of a service. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The family had been living with someone extraordinary while treating her as ordinary. They'd benefited from her wisdom, her care, her moral courage without ever recognizing her full humanity. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat. Amelia, I owe you an apology. We all do. Not just for yesterday, but for 12 years of not seeing you clearly. You don't owe me anything, sir. But you owe yourselves better than what you're planning. Margaret remained standing, her body rigid with unresolved emotion. I can't just forget what happened. I can't pretend we're safe. No one's asking you to forget. We're asking you to learn the right lessons. Which are? Amelia took a deep breath, knowing her next words could cost her everything. That fear makes people dangerous. That isolation breeds resentment. That dignity and respect are the best security systems ever invented. Margaret's composure finally shattered completely. Easy words from someone who's never been responsible for other people's lives. You don't understand the weight of protecting a family. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been protecting this family for 12 years. Yesterday was just the first time you noticed. The truth of that statement reverberated through the room. Amelia had been their shield against countless small crises, their buffer against daily chaos, their anchor in emotional storms. She'd protected them from everything from food poisoning at dinner parties to Harrison's college drinking problems to Chloe's unsuitable boyfriends. Margaret sank back into her chair, the fight draining out of her. I don't know how to move forward from this. You move forward by choosing trust over fear, Amelia said gently. By building relationships instead of walls. By remembering that the person who saved your life yesterday was someone you'd never bothered to really know. The family sat in silence, wrestling with uncomfortable truths about themselves and their relationships. The crisis had exposed more than Danny's hatred. It had revealed their own blindness, their own complicity in creating conditions for betrayal. Finally, Judge Whitmore spoke. "Amelia, what would you do? In our position, how would you handle this?" "I'd start by asking Constance why she felt invisible enough to betray you. I'd examine what drove Danny to such desperate hatred. And I'd make sure it never happened again by treating people's dignity as seriously as their job performance." Margaret looked up at her, tears finally breaking through. "I'm scared, Amelia. I'm scared of trusting again and being wrong." "Trust isn't about being right or wrong, Mrs. Whitmore. It's about being human." The dining room had grown dark while they talked, shadows creeping across the mahogany table like the weight of unspoken truths. Margaret sat in silence for long minutes after Amelia's words, her perfectly manicured hands trembling slightly in her lap. "I need some air," she said finally, standing abruptly and walking toward the French doors that led to the garden. Judge Whitmore started to follow, but Amelia shook her head. "Let her go. She needs to think without anyone watching." They could see Margaret through the glass, pacing among the rose bushes where the wedding ceremony had taken place just 24 hours earlier. White chairs still dotted the lawn, abandoned reminders of celebration turned to nightmare. Harrison slumped in his chair. "This is my fault. If I hadn't insisted on having the wedding here, none of this would have happened." "Danny would have found another opportunity," Amelia said firmly. "The wedding was just convenient timing. His hatred had been building for months. But Charlotte almost died because of my family's problems." Charlotte took his hand. "I married into this family knowing it came with challenges. Your father's position makes you all targets. What I didn't expect was that the biggest threat would come from someone we trusted." Chloe had been unusually quiet, but now she spoke up. "I keep thinking about all the times I complained to Constance about family rules, about feeling trapped by expectations. Did I give her ammunition to use against us?" "We all shared things with her," Judge Whitmore admitted. "Personal frustrations, family tensions. It felt natural because she was there, listening, seeming sympathetic." "She was sympathetic," Amelia said. "That's what made her betrayal so devastating. Constance genuinely cared about this family. But caring and loyalty aren't the same thing." Harrison looked puzzled. "How do you mean?" "Constance cared enough to listen to your problems, to offer comfort when you were struggling. But she wasn't loyal enough to protect your privacy when someone offered her a chance to feel important." The distinction was crucial. Caring could be conditional, situational, selfish. Loyalty required sacrifice, discretion, sometimes choosing others' welfare over your own interests. "How did you know?" Charlotte asked. "How did you recognize that we could trust you but not her?" Amelia considered the question carefully. "I didn't know about Constance specifically, but I've learned to recognize the difference between people who serve from love and people who serve from need." "What's the difference?" "People who serve from love find strength in making others happy. People who serve from need resent the very people they depend on. Constance needed this job, needed the income, needed the status. But she resented needing it." Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. "Whereas you chose to work here, even when you could have found employment elsewhere." "Yes, sir. I stayed because I came to love this family, despite your flaws. Constance stayed because she felt trapped by circumstances." The insight cut deep because it highlighted their own blindness. They'd never noticed the difference in motivation between their two household employees. Both women had performed their duties competently, but only one had done so with genuine devotion. Through the window, they watched Margaret sit on a stone bench among the roses, her head in her hands. The weight of betrayal, fear, and responsibility was crushing her usually indomitable spirit. "She's breaking," Judge Whitmore said quietly. "She's processing," Amelia corrected. "Sometimes you have to break before you can rebuild stronger." Harrison stood restlessly. "I should go to her." "No," Charlotte said, pulling him back down. "She needs to work through this herself. We all do." They sat in contemplative silence as darkness fell completely. The house staff had gone home after the police interviews, leaving the family alone with their thoughts and fears. Tomorrow would bring reporters, lawyers, court proceedings, and the beginning of a very public ordeal. What happens to us now? Chloe asked. I mean, as a family. Do we retreat from the world? Hire bodyguards? Move somewhere else? We choose, Amelia said simply. Every family faces crises that test their values. You can let fear turn you into prisoners in your own life, or you can use this experience to become better people. Judge Whitmore studied her face in the dim light. What would becoming better people look like? It would look like learning from your mistakes without being paralyzed by them. Like treating people's dignity as a security measure instead of relying only on cameras and background checks. You're asking us to trust again after we've been burned. I'm asking you to trust differently. With wisdom instead of naivety. With boundaries instead of blindness. But still with open hearts. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her hair disheveled and her makeup smeared. She'd been crying, but her posture showed new resolve. I've made a decision, she announced, taking her seat at the table. The family waited tensely for her pronouncement. I'm not going to let Danny Kozlov and Constance Wells turn me into someone I don't recognize. I refuse to let their betrayal poison my ability to trust good people. Relief flooded the room, but Margaret held up her hand. However, things will change. We're going to be smarter about security, more careful about privacy, more intentional about the people we bring into our lives. She looked directly at Amelia. Starting with you. Amelia's heart clenched, expecting termination despite everything. I want to offer you a new position. Not as household staff, but as family security coordinator. Someone who knows us well enough to spot threats, who cares enough to protect us, who has the wisdom to balance safety with humanity. The offer stunned everyone, including Amelia. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't have training in security work. You have something better. You have judgment. You have loyalty. And you've already proven you can save our lives. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Margaret's right. Traditional security focuses on external threats. We need someone who can recognize internal ones, who understands people well enough to spot dangerous resentment before it becomes deadly action. Harrison grinned for the first time in days. It's perfect. Amelia already knows our routines, our vulnerabilities, our relationships. She could coordinate with professional security while maintaining the personal touch that makes this house feel like home. The pay would be substantial, Margaret continued. Enough to bring your grandchildren to visit regularly, to set up college funds for them, to give you the security you've provided us for years. Amelia felt overwhelmed by the unexpected opportunity. It would mean staying with the family she'd grown to love while having the resources to truly care for her own family. There's one condition, she said carefully. Margaret tensed. What condition? We do this together. All of us. Security isn't just about protecting you from threats. It's about creating an environment where threats don't develop in the first place. Meaning we treat every person who works here with respect and dignity. We learn their names, their stories, their dreams. We pay attention to their struggles and help when we can. We create loyalty through kindness, not just paychecks. Charlotte clapped her hands. Yes. Like Mrs. O'Brien in Boston. She'd die before she'd let anyone hurt our family because she knows we'd do the same for her. Judge Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. A comprehensive approach. Address both external security and internal relationships. It won't guarantee safety, Amelia warned. Nothing can do that. But it will minimize the likelihood of betrayal from within while maintaining the warmth that makes this house special. Margaret extended her hand across the table. Partners. Amelia shook it firmly. Partners. The handshake felt like more than an employment agreement. It was a recognition of equality, of mutual respect, of shared commitment to something larger than individual survival. There's something else, Margaret said, her voice softer. I owe you an apology. Not just for yesterday, but for the way we have been treating you for the past 12 years. Of benefiting from your care without acknowledging your worth. Mrs. Whitmore. No, let me finish. You saved our lives, but you also saved our souls. You showed us who we were becoming and gave us a chance to choose something better." Tears ran down Margaret's cheeks, 12 years of suppressed recognition finally breaking free. "You've been the heart of this family all along. We were just too blind to see it." Harrison raised an imaginary glass. "To Amelia Johnson, our guardian angel, our moral compass, and now our partner in building something better." The family joined the toast, their faces reflecting hope instead of fear for the first time since the wedding disaster. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, heading toward some other crisis in other people's lives. But inside the Whitmore house, healing had begun. 3 months later, the autumn sun cast golden light across the Whitmore estate gardens as Amelia walked through her morning security check. 3 months had transformed everything about the property while somehow preserving its essential warmth. Discreet cameras monitored entry points, but flower boxes softened their presence. New staff had been hired with careful background screening, but also with genuine welcome and respect. "Morning, Miss Johnson," called Kevin Martinez, the new groundskeeper. Unlike Danny, Kevin had been brought into the family fold from day one. Amelia knew about his young daughter, his night school classes, his dream of starting a landscaping business. Margaret had already offered to provide references when he was ready. "Morning, Kevin. How's little Sophia's dance recital going?" "Next week." Mrs. Whitmore asked if she could attend. "Can you believe that?" Amelia smiled. She could believe it now. Margaret had kept her promise to see the people around her as complete human beings rather than just functions. The kitchen buzzed with breakfast preparations overseen by Mrs. Patricia Walsh, the new head cook. A widow in her 50s, Patricia had quickly become the grandmother figure the family had never known they needed. She'd brought Irish warmth and fierce protectiveness that complemented Amelia's watchful care. "The judge wants his usual heart-healthy breakfast," Patricia said, "but he's been eyeing my soda bread all week." "Half a slice," Amelia suggested. "Compromise keeps everyone happy." It was the kind of personal attention that made people feel valued rather than managed. Patricia beamed and cut a generous half-slice, knowing the gesture would make the judge's morning. Amelia found Margaret in the morning room, reviewing security reports that had become part of their weekly routine. But instead of fear-driven paranoia, these meetings focused on building positive relationships with staff and community. "Patricia's son called this morning," Margaret said, looking up from her papers. "He got into the culinary program at Johnson & Wales. She's over the moon." "That's wonderful. Are we helping with tuition?" "Scholarship fund I established last month. Anonymous, of course, but it'll cover everything." The scholarship program had been Margaret's idea, a way to invest in their employees' families while creating genuine loyalty. It was security through generosity rather than suspicion. Harrison appeared in the doorway, grinning broadly. "Amelia, you need to see this." He handed her a letter from the district attorney's office. Danny Kozlov had pled guilty to all charges and would spend 25 years in prison. Constance had received a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation, but would serve 5 years. The legal proceedings were finally over. "Justice," Margaret said simply. "And closure," Amelia added. "Now we can focus completely on moving forward." Charlotte entered carrying a large manila envelope, her face glowing with excitement. The wedding photos arrived. The ones from before. Everything happened. She spread the pictures across the table, revealing moments of pure joy captured before the crisis. Harrison and Charlotte exchanging vows, families celebrating, guests dancing under the stars. The beauty of the day had been preserved despite the terror that followed. "We should frame some of these," Margaret said, studying a photo of the ceremony. "Not to forget what happened, but to remember what mattered most." Amelia picked up a picture of the entire family laughing together during the reception's early moments. They looked genuinely happy, surrounded by people who loved them. It was worth preserving. "There's something else," Charlotte said, pulling out a smaller envelope. "We had the photographer capture one more picture that day." She handed Amelia a photo taken during the chaos of the police investigation. It showed Amelia standing protectively near the family, her face calm but determined while everyone else looked terrified. She was clearly their anchor in the storm. "You were magnificent," Margaret said softly. I want this framed in the front hall, so everyone who enters this house knows who really protects this family. The recognition meant everything to Amelia. For 12 years, she'd been invisible. Now she was being honored as the hero she'd always been. Judge Whitmore joined them, carrying his own announcement. The FBI called this morning. Danny's computer contained evidence of a larger network planning attacks on federal judges' families. Our case helped break up a domestic terrorism ring. The revelation was chilling but also validating. Amelia's quick action had prevented not just one family's murder but potentially multiple attacks across the country. You saved more lives than we knew, Harrison said, awe in his voice. We saved them, Amelia corrected. By choosing trust over fear, love over hatred. That's what stopped the cycle. Chloe burst through the front door, home from Colombia for the weekend. At 24, she'd matured considerably since the wedding crisis, trading rebellious anger for purposeful activism. Guess what? She announced. I got the internship with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'll be working on programs that help people like Danny before they turn violent. Margaret hugged her daughter tightly. I'm so proud of you. Amelia inspired me, Chloe said. She showed me that real strength comes from helping people heal, not hurting them back. The transformation in the family was remarkable. Crisis had stripped away pretense and revealed their capacity for growth. They'd chosen to become better people rather than bitter ones. Speaking of healing, Charlotte said, her smile turning mysterious, Harrison and I have an announcement. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach, the gesture conveying everything before words could. The room erupted in celebration. Margaret cried with joy while Judge Whitmore beamed with grandfatherly pride. This new life represented hope, the future they'd almost lost to Danny's hatred. The baby will know Amelia as family, Charlotte declared. Not as staff, but as the woman who saved their parents' lives. Amelia felt overwhelmed by the honor. She'd gone from invisible servant to beloved family protector to future grandmother figure. The journey had been painful but transformative for everyone involved. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner in the restored dining room, Amelia took her place at the table as an equal participant. The scene echoed the tense family meeting 3 months earlier, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where fear had once dominated, love now prevailed. Where suspicion had poisoned relationships, trust had taken root. Where isolation had seemed like safety, connection had proven to be true security. I have something to say, Margaret announced, standing with a champagne glass. 3 months ago, someone tried to destroy our family through hatred and betrayal. They failed because one person chose love over revenge, courage over safety, action over silence. She looked at Amelia with genuine affection. Amelia Johnson didn't just save our lives. She saved our souls. She showed us who we could be when we stopped being afraid and started being human. The family raised their glasses in tribute, but Amelia shook her head. We saved each other, she said. You could have fired me for disrupting the wedding. You could have let fear turn you cruel. Instead, you chose to grow, to change, to become the people I always believed you could be. Margaret wiped away tears. To family, she toasted. Not just blood, but the bonds we choose to honor. To family, everyone echoed. As they dined together, sharing stories and laughter, the September sunset painted the dining room in warm gold light. Outside, Kevin tended the rose garden where the wedding had taken place. Patricia hummed in the kitchen while preparing tomorrow's meals. The house buzzed with life and love rather than fear and suspicion. Later, as Amelia prepared for bed in her new suite of rooms, no longer the small space above the kitchen, she found a handwritten note that had been slipped under her door. Dear Amelia, it read in Margaret's careful script, I spent 12 years treating you as invisible because I was afraid of seeing my own reflection in your strength. Thank you for saving us from ourselves as much as from Danny. You are the best of us, and we are better because of you. With love and gratitude, Margaret. Amelia folded the note carefully and placed it in her jewelry box next to her grandmother's cross. Some treasures were worth preserving forever. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find the entire family standing in the hallway, even Chloe up from school. Group hug, Harrison suggested with a grin. They surrounded her with warmth and affection, 5 people who'd learned that love really could conquer hatred, that trust could triumph over fear, that family wasn't just about blood but about choice. In that moment, Amelia understood that her nightmare from the wedding morning had been a warning that led to salvation. She'd dreamed of the family begging for her help, and in saving them, she'd found her own redemption. The crisis that could have destroyed them had instead revealed their capacity for growth, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Danny's poison had been neutralized by something far more powerful: the human heart's ability to choose hope over hatred. As the family said their goodnights and returned to their rooms, Amelia looked out her window at the peaceful estate grounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to protect and serve and love. But tonight, all was well. The black maid who had saved a white family from poisoning had become something more precious. A bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of moral courage, and living proof that love always finds a way to triumph in the end. 1 year later, the first anniversary of what the media had dubbed the Hamptons' wedding poisoning arrived with little fanfare. The story had dominated headlines for weeks, then gradually faded as newer scandals captured public attention. But for the Whitmore family, the date marked a celebration of survival and transformation. Amelia stood in the nursery, gently rocking baby Robert Whitmore III while Charlotte napped nearby. At 6 months old, little Bobby had inherited his mother's bright blue eyes and his father's stubborn chin. True to Charlotte's promise, he would grow up knowing Amelia as family, not staff. "There's my favorite grandson," Judge Whitmore said softly, entering the nursery. At 73, he'd taken senior status on the federal bench, reducing his caseload to spend more time with family. "How did the FBI briefing go?" Amelia asked, referring to the quarterly security updates they now received. The domestic terrorism network has been completely dismantled. 17 arrests across 6 states, all stemming from evidence found on Danny's computer. Your quick thinking that night helped prevent attacks on at least 4 other federal judges' families. The knowledge that her actions had saved multiple families still amazed Amelia. What started as protecting one household had rippled into something much larger. Any word on Danny's psychological evaluation? He's been diagnosed with severe narcissistic personality disorder and chronic depression. The psychiatrists believe his wife's leaving triggered a complete psychological break. He's receiving treatment in prison, but he'll serve the full 25 years. Constance had been released after serving 3 years, her cooperation helping prosecutors understand how domestic workers could be vulnerable to recruitment by extremist groups. She'd moved to Florida to start over, sending a letter of apology that Margaret had graciously accepted. "The security conference calls in an hour," Judge Whitmore reminded her. "The Secret Service wants to discuss implementing our model at other high-profile residences." Amelia's innovative approach to household security, combining professional protection with genuine relationship building, had attracted national attention. Federal agencies were studying how the Whitmore family had transformed crisis into opportunity. Margaret appeared in the doorway, radiant in a yellow sundress that reflected her dramatically improved mood. "Amelia, your granddaughter is on the phone. Something about graduation." Amelia's face lit up. 12-year-old Keisha had just finished elementary school with straight A's, thanks partly to the education fund Amelia could now provide. Her grandchildren visited the estate monthly, treated as honored guests rather than staff family. "Tell her I'll call back after the conference. And remind her about next weekend." Keisha and her brothers were spending the summer at the estate, swimming in the pool, learning about gardens from Kevin, and being spoiled by everyone. The house had never been more alive with laughter and activity. "Kevin's landscaping business officially launches next month," Margaret said. 3 commercial contracts already signed, including the Pemberton estate in Boston. Charlotte's family had not only forgiven the wedding disaster but had embraced the Whitmores more warmly afterward. They'd been impressed by how the family handled crisis and grew from it. "Mrs. Pemberton specifically requested Kevin because she heard how we've supported his dreams," Margaret continued. "She wants to invest in businesses that treat employees like family." Harrison bounded up the stairs, still in his running gear. The New York Times wants to do a follow-up article. 1 year later, how a family rebuilt after betrayal. "Should we agree?" If it helps other families facing similar situations, Amelia said. But only if they focus on the healing, not the horror. The media attention had been intense initially, but the family's graceful handling of interviews and their emphasis on forgiveness over revenge had earned public respect. Margaret had become an unlikely spokeswoman for treating domestic workers with dignity. Chloe arrived home from her Southern Poverty Law Center internship, energized by her work helping people escape extremist groups. We've got 17 people in our de-radicalization program now, including 2 who specifically mentioned reading about our family's story. How so? Margaret asked. They said if the Whitmores could forgive attempted murder and build something better, they could forgive their own grievances and find healthier ways to deal with anger. The ripple effects continued spreading in unexpected directions. The family had received hundreds of letters from people inspired by their choice of love over hatred, healing over revenge. Patricia's making her famous roast for dinner, Harrison announced. Kevin's family is joining us, plus Amelia's grandchildren, plus Father Santos and his wife. The dinner table that once seated only family now regularly accommodated extended household family. Sunday dinners had become community celebrations, bringing together people from different backgrounds united by mutual care and respect. The scholarship fund announcements are ready, Margaret said to Amelia. 5 recipients this year, including Patricia's son and the daughter of our new housekeeper. The Whitmore Foundation for Household Heroes had grown beyond their own employees, supporting education for domestic workers' children across the region. It was Margaret's way of honoring all the invisible people who kept families functioning. Dr. Morrison arrived for baby Bobby's checkup, but also to deliver news about the trauma counseling program she'd established. 12 families have completed our sessions on rebuilding trust after workplace betrayal. Success rate is remarkable when people commit to genuine change. The evening conference call with federal security agencies went smoothly. Representatives from the Secret Service, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security listened as Amelia described their integrated approach. Professional security measures combined with authentic relationship building, background checks balanced with genuine care for employees' welfare. The key insight, she explained to the listening officials, is that security isn't just about keeping bad people out. It's about creating conditions where good people want to protect you. After the call, the extended family gathered for Patricia's roast dinner. The dining room table stretched with additional leaves to accommodate 15 people representing multiple generations, ethnicities, and backgrounds. But somehow, they'd become one family. Judge Whitmore offered the blessing. We're grateful for survival, for growth, for the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. We're grateful for the people who've shown us that love really can triumph over hatred, that trust can be rebuilt stronger than before. Amen, everyone responded. As conversations flowed around the table, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary year. The wedding that started in celebration nearly ended in tragedy, and ultimately led to transformation beyond anything she could have imagined. Her role as family security coordinator had evolved into something like a household ambassador, building bridges between the family and everyone who worked for them. The position came with excellent pay, full benefits, and the respect she'd earned through 12 years of faithful service. But more than professional advancement, she'd gained something precious. A family that truly saw her, valued her, and loved her unconditionally. Later that evening, as guests departed and the house settled into peaceful quiet, Margaret found Amelia on the garden terrace where the wedding ceremony had taken place exactly 1 year earlier. "Do you ever regret it?" Margaret asked. "Saving us? Your life would have been simpler if you'd stayed silent that night." Amelia smiled, watching fireflies dance among the roses Kevin had planted to replace the wedding decorations. "Mrs. Whitmore, my grandmother always said that love isn't about keeping life simple. It's about making life meaningful." Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She taught me that when you have the power to choose between love and fear, between healing and hurting, you choose love. Every single time. Margaret nodded, understanding finally flooding her heart. Even when people don't deserve it. Especially then. Because that's when love has the power to change everything. They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 women from different worlds who'd found common ground in the recognition that all people deserved dignity, respect, and care. Above them, stars emerged in the clear summer sky, eternal witnesses to human struggles and triumphs. Somewhere in the distance, baby Bobby stirred in his crib, dreaming dreams that would be shaped by the love surrounding him from birth. The black maid who saved a white family from poisoning had become something far more precious, a living testament to the truth that love always finds a way to heal even the deepest wounds. And in a world too often divided by fear and hatred, the Whitmore estate stood as proof that families, chosen as well as born, could triumph over any darkness when they chose to see each other's light. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.